Hey everybody, we are back. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction, and coming at you with a very interesting video which I never expected to make, but here we are. About 2-3 years ago, I started a movement called Comicsgate, and I started it by releasing a piece to the Federalist about what Marvel Comics was doing. In every instance, all of their creators were going off on politics, making crazy rants about the president, Donald Trump, and it reflected in their books. Their books had replaced all of the beloved characters like Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Spider-Man, etc. with minority counterparts in order to try to virtue signal how woke they were. It was a disastrous time in comics. Comics went downhill very quickly. And I went to different comic shops, and every comic shop across the board, the comic owner says, I don't know what's going on with Marvel. Marvel used to be the vast majority of my sales, and now they are down to, a sliver of what they once were, which is killing my business. So they complained. Marvel's sales tanked. The comic industry took a big dip for several years standing, and we had what we had, which was kind of like an indie revolution via Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where we were making our own comics in order to sort of combat their wokeness of what was going on, and we successfully did so. We showed the way of what was good and how to tell good stories. You can check that out on my Flying Sparks books. They're still available on Amazon, so you can get them anytime and check those out. But Marvel, they saw the writing on the wall, and they replaced their editor-in-chief, Axel Alonso, who was one of these social justice warriors trying to make a statement with all of these Marvel books, with a man named C.B. Cebulski. Now, C.B. Cebulski has been an editor at Marvel for a long time. He's worked on different projects. He actually took hits right away when he became editor-in-chief because he had a pseudonym, Akira Yoshida. And the pseudonym made him sound like he was a Japanese guy, and he's not a Japanese guy. And so, of course, the left went nuts and just tried to destroy him right away. They tried to say that he was culturally appropriating, et cetera, he should be removed from his post, et cetera, which had nothing to do with the job that he was doing or anything like that. And for a while, it looked like things weren't going very well at Marvel even still. We kind of had just more of the same going on over at Marvel Comics. But we have to remember that these comics get planned out 2-3 years in advance. You don't get moves on comic books right away with these companies because they're coming out with monthly books. And as people who were trying to compete with the industry, that's why I made it a priority to come out with monthly books. Because if you're not really just pushing that constant content, you're really not making any sort of inroads with the customer base. That is what comics is all about. It's a pulp medium. It's an ongoing story, and this is how you make the comic books historically. So. It took 2 or 3 years. I think C.B. Cebulski's been a editor-in-chief for about 2 years, and we're starting to see the changes that are impacting Marvel right now. And what happened is we see there's 3 primary writers who seem to get carte blanche to do whatever they want. Editorial doesn't even mess with them, which is unheard of in Marvel Comics history. I even remember going back to like 2006, 2008, when they had somebody like credentialed like J. Michael Straczynski, who wrote Babylon 5, and even though he had his Spider-Man run, which was going very well and worse at some points, editorial would mess with it. Everybody remembers the famous Gwen Stacy had children via Norman Osborn story, which everybody roundly hated. Well, that was a directive from Marvel editorial. That was not J. Michael Straczynski's concept. He was not going to have Norman Osborn sleeping with Gwen Stacy originally. And there was a fight between Straczynski and editorial over that. And of course, then there's the famous One More Day, which destroyed Spider-Man's marriage and continuity because they wanted a younger, hipper Spider-Man, which was pretty lame. And that all was directed from editorial. J. Michael Straczynski wrote what he had to write, and they even switched it around even after that because he was directed to. And he eventually got mad and quit Marvel, and same thing happened to DC. He went to DC, and he started his books, and editorial started messing around with these events and things like that, and so he quit there too. So the moral of the story is, even if you're a big name writer, you have to bow to the whims of editorial, and editorial makes these directives to actually push the company in often wrong directions because they think they're trying to push for a hipper, younger audience all the time. And it doesn't work because the hip young audience is not going into comic shops buying Spider-Man. It's never going to happen. You're never going to get a hip young teenage girl into a comic shop buying Spider-Man, no matter how woke it is, no matter what YA writer you put on it. And they should realize that. That's not their target audience. They've got an audience, and they were looking for a different audience. It's like that meme with the guy with the girlfriend who's going like, and the girlfriend getting angry with him. I mean, that meme caught on for a reason. And it was it's a very good metaphor for what happened with Marvel Comics. So we had that going on for a long time. Marvel Comics seemed to just be floundering, and there wasn't much hope there. But now we've got what seems like editorial really taking a step back and allowing some of their best writers to have carte blanche and do what they want. We've seen this with Donny Cates. Donny Cates is the writer of Venom and Thor, and upcoming Thor. He's done a great job on Thanos. He wrote a Silver Surfer miniseries. He seems to be able to write whatever he wants, and editorial doesn't really get in the way. You see his Absolute Carnage crossover. He sort of directed that himself and let that go, and you can tell it's a Donny Cates story. It's not some forced weird event. Chip Zdarsky is doing the same thing. He did a great job on Spectacular Spider-Man. He's now doing it on Daredevil and other books. And then we've got, who's the third? Jonathan Hickman, who's taken over the X-Men and actually, telling some weird, compelling tales which feel like Jonathan Hickman stories, not like random Marvel stories that happen to be forced into Jonathan Hickman's pocket. And again, Jonathan Hickman's another one that he was being so overtaxed and overworked by Marvel that, it burned him out for a while. And he had to take a step back for a couple of years, which is, a crisis because they lost one of their better writers for a while. So these three writers really are taking the helm of Marvel and really doing a lot with Marvel. And all of the major titles seem to be in good shape. X-Men's got Hickman. Thor's got Donny Cates. Daredevil's got Zdarsky. So they're doing pretty good on these fronts. Even Nick Spencer, who was roundly criticized for his Captain America run, has been doing a very good job on Spider-Man and has been pretty faithful to it, bringing the character a little bit back to its roots compared to what we've seen in a long time. And you don't see too many people complaining about even Dan Slott's Fantastic Four. There seems to be a new direction in Marvel, which has changed things. Now, of course, there's like some pretty lousy books still. You still got Saladin Ahmed doing his books, and he's on Ms. Marvel. But you know what? You guys weren't going to buy Ms. Marvel anyway. I wasn't going to buy Ms. Marvel anyway. Nobody really cares about that book. It's a C-tier book that nobody cares about. So who cares if an SJW is on the SJW concept book? The main criticism was that we didn't want these people wrecking the main books, which Marvel has rectified. That there's always been bad books at Marvel. This isn't like something that happened in 2015, 2016. They put out 80, 100 books per month, and you're always going to get some weird stuff like Ms. Marvel or Zoe Quinn's whatever she's on. She's on a book that just nobody again cares about, or Runaways, which is written by like a Rainbow Rowell. I don't know who that is, but I don't care because I don't care about Runaways, and I'm never going to buy it anyway. So they listened to the extent that they've taken the major characters that are the iconic ones, that are the classic heroes that everybody cares about, and they've actually put quality teams on them just like everybody asked. That is what we demanded, and they reverted everybody back. There's no BS replacement characters going on anymore. They are pushing in a direction that seems all right. You got what's his name? How did I not pronounce this name? But you know my content's not scripted. I don't even edit. Let me look. It is Jim Zub. I'm sorry, Jim Zub I'm talking about. He's another fan favorite because he's just nice to fans and talks to them. He's on Conan, and Conan's another iconic character which they're doing a decent job with. So you can go down the list and name after name, they're doing a decent job with the characters. At least in some cases, they're doing great jobs with them. Now, like I said, there's always going to be the outliers. There are 80 plus books. So in an 80 plus book line, you can't have Jonathan Hickman write all of them. You have to develop new talent. You have to have mid-list writers who don't cost as much. You have to do that if you want to maintain all these books and develop the next generation, and they'll find another hit. What's going to happen is one of these writers who are out there, who I don't know who they are, is going to have a hit at some point, who's going to be good, and everybody's going to hail them as the next Donny Cates or whatever. And this is how they keep the business going, because eventually Donny Cates and Jonathan Hickman become too expensive for them, because they become popular writers, they get into movies, they get movie deals on their creator-owned stuff, and they're not going to want to work for these characters anymore. And so you have to keep churning through and churning through and churning through in order to find the next stuff, which is why there are so many books to begin with. And only an insane person would go through and try to read all of them. But I already listed, 5, 6, 7, 10 books per month, which is a lot as it is. If you're thinking about, $4 a book, $5 a book, you're spending $40, $50 a month already on these books if you're doing this. And that's the line. That is the main line. That's their bread and butter. That's the stuff everybody's hoping for. And now we're at the point where we can actually judge that this is C.B. Cebulski's efforts. For the first year or so, it's the end of Axel Alonso's era, and you see some kind of lame storylines wrapping things up, taking things over, some new things starting, which were not the best. And now those have kind of churned through, and it's C.B. Cebulski's direction. And he's taking what seems to be a more hands-off approach on the good writers, on the solid writers, and letting them do their thing. And that's what we needed from this company to do this. And so I actually applaud C.B. Cebulski. I think he's done a pretty good job. As a person who's in charge of that much content, he's done pretty good. Now, of course, there's always room to improve. And of course, you still see, even though these guys are mostly the apolitical types that are at the top of these books, you still see the sort of leftist creep in the lower ranks, which is not all the way through. But it would be nice to see a conservative writer or something like that just be represented by Marvel at some point. I don't know that CB has the gravitas to do that. Maybe it'll be the next guy in line, but I feel like there's been a culture shift a little bit. And so we might see some things coming down the pipeline in the next 10 years, which are going to be pushing the culture in a different direction. And and I always tell people this: the social pressure is all that matters. If you put enough social pressure on to these companies, they don't care. These are corporations. They are not. They have no skin in the game except for being corporations for the most part. So they bow to the social pressure because they don't want to deal with all the repercussions of the social pressure from the SJWs and things like that, because they're the loudest and all that. If we put social pressure back, it's going to change things and it's going to push things in a new direction. Even though the industry roundly criticizes what Comicsgate became, because as much as we had our genuine concerns, as much as I posted an article which was academic and was about numbers and stats and things like that, there was a group that latched on, which was a bunch of anonymous online harassers who were just bothering creators. As much as that was the case, the point was taken that the stories that were being told are not the stories that comic readers wanted, and they have made the switch, even though they roundly criticize the name. And the name doesn't matter. That's always going to happen with any movement, political, anything like that. Don't get attached to names or hashtags or things like that. The media has a vested interest in destroying those things, and there's always going to be bad people who latch on to movements and things like that. Now that name is so toxic that even people like me who started the movement will not associate with it. It just is what it is. That is very real, and they had real concerns in roundly criticizing that movement. That's true. But if you look at the fruits of their labors, and that's all that matters, the comic books themselves. This is what I've always talked about. It's about the comics. It's about creating great works. They have turned that corner. C.B. Cebulski has made a change in the culture at Marvel where it looks like there's a couple things going on. One, they've sort of clamped down on their social media to where these creators are not being as awful as they were 2 years ago. Two, they have given creative license to some of the better writers out there to actually do things. And three, most of the line's actually doing pretty good right now. And it's already showing in the results. It looks like comic sales are a little bit flat, but they're like maybe 1% up this year from recent stats. So they're doing right by the customers, is actually helping the industry, which is helping everybody along all the way to the comic shop. This is what we wanted, and so there's not much to complain about. Now, there are still steps to take. I think it's best to support indie creators. I always tell people, please support indie creators. And that's why I host live streams showing off people's indie comics and things like that. When you see a good indie book, support it. Talk about it, make videos about it, talk about it on social media, and put it out there. Now, this is for two reasons. One, I do want the industry to change so it's not a duopoly. I think that's very important. But there's a second reason, is that the talent that gets developed in the indie creator circles is they see who's successful and who's doing things the right way and things like that. And those people get called up as the next writers for these companies and things like that. So if you want these companies to change, you should support the writers who are doing the things, like a Mark Pellegrini or a Bill Williams with Punchline and Black Hops, who are actually creating comics that are good and pushing things in the direction that we want. When you do that, these companies will see this over time. It again creates that social pressure that they respond to. Now, it's going to take some time. There will be bumps in the road. It will be frustrating because it will seem like it's not growing fast enough, etc. But these things take 10, 15, 20 years. It takes a long time to really shift a culture. So don't lose faith. Things are changing. Again, you can see this in the fruits of Marvel's works. They are pushing in a direction that we wanted, even though they denounced the movement name. And so it has turned the corner. So I got to applaud CB Cebulski and Marvel for what they do. I know I'm not supposed to do that. That's not supposed to be the brand, guys, but I don't care about that. I care about telling the truth in these videos, and hopefully you agree and are enjoying that. If you don't, leave a comment. I don't care. I mean, we can talk about this. But for now, it seems like CB Cebulski's doing a good job. If you enjoy my content and all that, please hit the like and subscribe button. Do check out my comic book Flying Sparks, which I think you'll enjoy if you like old school Marvel comics from the 80s and 90s. I've got the link to Amazon on the description. And have a good day, everybody.